our family and our friends and our loved ones, and of course, sharing this with everyone we know, and of course, getting active in the next legislative session, right, so we can make some big change. Now, that being said, my name is Carlos Caro, and I am the secretary of the board for Texas NORML. And again, there's many reasons why we get involved in the cannabis movement. There's a myriad of reasons. My reason deals more with social justice. It was an issue I studied in grad school, the war on drugs, namely its effects on communities of color. But with that being said, we've got a great lineup of speakers for y'all tonight. Our first speaker is a member of our Texas NORML Legal Counsel, Jaime Spencer. Jaime will go ahead and give us an update regarding the legal landscape in Texas. So we can go ahead and welcome to the stage Jaime Spencer.
Thank you, Carlos. Howdy, folks. Thanks again for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. So when Carlos asked me to speak tonight, I said, hey, what's my topic? And I'm going to read my assigned topic for tonight. A rundown of what penalties, fines one can get in Austin if they are to be stopped by APD and found to be in what is normally Class B misdemeanor possession territory, what would be advisable in a situation where you're asked by APD if you're in possession and you actually are, the consequences, and then anything you feel comfortable speaking about related to current Cbd hemp situation and legality of possession of such products. And I'm actually going to take those things in that order. But I want y'all to think about this second part, the part about kind of giving y'all an update on Cbd hemp. I'm going to give you the short version preview right now, and that is it's still kind of all up in the air. But I'm going to do my best on that part. What I want y'all to do potentially, while of course still paying attention to the first part of what I'm talking about, is if y'all have specific questions regarding all of this hemp news that you're hearing and what is and isn't legal, I'll cover that as well, but if y'all have specific questions, happy to take questions from the crowd at that point. Okay, so back to part one. A rundown of penalties, fines, and for now, of course, that's Texas, but we're talking specifically with Austin and APD and other agencies around here and what normally happens. And I'm going to intermix that with what would be advisable in that situation. All right. Well, in terms of what would be advisable, always being polite and cooperative with the police when they are there. They are the ones with the guns. If they want to take you to jail, they will. So, polite and cooperative. Let your lawyer figure out any legal problems with this stop and why they shouldn't have pulled you over, and don't argue with the cop about it. But here's the deal. In Austin, things have kind of changed, and we're a little bit of a beacon, I hope, for what can happen in the rest of Texas, and then just, obviously, we need to progress beyond that point. But there are 254 counties in Texas. Travis County was the first to come up with an actual cite and release program where they didn't have to arrest marijuana users on the spot. I believe that one started in 2008. I'm not exactly sure, but that's been a long time. But at this point, if you're talking about a small amount of marijuana in Travis County, the most likely thing, unless you're jerking the officer's chain, is that you'll actually get a ticket. Now, I'm supposed to talk about penalties. It's still a Class B misdemeanor. It's not a Class C. Do not ignore this ticket. And everyone kind of knows that if you ignore traffic tickets, they get worse and they pile on. Well, if you ignore a possession of marijuana, hey, just show up in court to try to take care of this. We don't want to send you to jail. If you ignore that one, you not only get the warrant to go to jail, but then you potentially get another charge for failure to appear. So, take it seriously. But yeah, you'll probably get a ticket in Travis County. Normally, the justices of the peaces, and we have 5 of them in Travis County, it's a geographical deal. Like if you are caught speeding or for whatever reason, a trooper or whoever it is going to send you to a justice of the peace. It depends on where you are. Right now, we're in justice of the peace number 5 because we're downtown. But people out southwest would be in justice of the peace number 3. To their right on a map is justice of the peace number 4 territory. But it doesn't matter where you are in Travis County when you get this ticket. Everyone's going to come to justice of the peace number 5 here in 78701 zip code where the courthouse and the jail are. And we've moved to a better system. You have the opportunity at that point to skip the booking process entirely. In theory, what you're showing up for is for them to identify you with fingerprints, and that is the start of your criminal history in terms of, even if we get this case dismissed, what records are there left behind. So none of them have been created yet. And Travis County, I think in a very progressive manner for a team of prosecutors, I mean, they are required to somehow enforce the law, have allowed the folks that show up at Justice of the Peace number 5 with a Travis County marijuana ticket to just skip the booking process. Don't get photographed. Don't get fingerprinted. Hey, we'll reset your court date. I think it's usually 4 or 5 weeks out, something like that. And if you'll come back with this certificate saying that you have completed this 4-hour marijuana class, and yeah, it's going to tell you all the dangers about it or whatever. You bring back this certificate, that's it. You don't have to go hire a lawyer. You don't have to do community service. You're certainly not on probation. You're not in jail. It is a jail. I'm supposed to talk about the fines and penalties. It's still up to 180 days in jail for any usable quantity in Texas. So that's what happens in Travis County. Obviously, we're all here tonight because we want to see what happens when you get pulled over and the cop smells the odor of marijuana in your car. We want the police officer to write you a ticket for speeding and then let you go on your way because marijuana is finally legal in Texas. And that's what we're going to achieve as Texas NORML and also all of the other organizations that are working towards the same goal. Okay. Let me see if I've covered part 1. Goodness gracious, did I leave any doubt? I left. Did I leave room for doubt or misspeak? Yes, marijuana is not legal. No, it is. It's still a criminal act, and you will. I mean, that still counts as being prosecuted for it. It's just that wouldn't leave you even with anything that you would need to expunge. But absolutely, yes. I can't believe I left that hole there for you. All right. Before I start sort of a CBD hemp spiel at this point, show of hands, does anybody have a specific question about that topic that they think they'd like me to address? And with no help from the yeah. You need a license to grow hemp. Is that correct? I do believe that's correct. And I think that we're a ways away from figuring out all of it. But yes, that's part of the law.
So if I get a license, I can grow hemp in my backyard?
So the actual answer is I don't know. I think the answer is no. I am not an expert on that. That specific part of it in terms of what the regulations currently fully allow and don't. It's something I'm trying to get up to speed on, but I'm not competent to answer that question. I don't mind other questions that I don't have answers to, by the way.
The activation or will be choosing the seeds?
I'm sorry.
The activation choose the seeds.
Yeah, I mean,
Until July next year.
all right. Okay, so as you can kind of tell from that first attempted Ask a Lawyer, there's a lot to be learned. What I really want to talk about is what you're reading about hemp. So, we can think of it this way. In theory, even microscopic amounts of cocaine, if my client is aware that they're possessing them, even that is a criminal act. It's a felony. Starts as a state jail felony. We'll ignore for now the possibility that if it's truly tiny, the person might not have known they still had it. For marijuana, it's a usable quantity. The real truth is, even though there's been some litigation by marijuana defendants who were convicted and then appealed, if it was here in Austin, it would be to the Third Court of Appeals. If it was somewhere else, it would have been one of the other circuit courts, and then sometimes these cases going to what's called the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. That's our highest criminal court. It's like our criminal Supreme Court. None of those cases were ever decided in favor of a defendant saying that somehow, they possessed something, but it wasn't a usable quantity. So even though that was theoretically limited, unless you were talking about non-germinable stems and seeds and things that you could take out of the plant and would make a difference in the weight class, i.e. if it would take it from just over 4 ounces, which is a felony, to just under 4 ounces, which is a misdemeanor, that could make a big deal. Other than that, that was all there was to quibble about in terms of what the definition of marijuana was. In fact, to go further, there is a 1975 Texas Court of Criminal Appeals case that I think is no longer valid. We'll talk about that. That says that they don't even need to bring a chemist to your trial to convict you of possession of marijuana. And I realize most of y'all probably haven't seen a possession of a controlled substance trial, but one of the things that the state has to do is to prove that the substance that my client was possessing was cocaine or methamphetamine or heroin, or could be pills, prescribed pills, depending on potentially not having the prescription and how many of those pills they had. They have to somehow be able to come in and identify that, and they have to do that chemically. It's literally not sufficient for the state to just put up a police officer who says, I found him with some white powder and I know what cocaine looks like. But decades and decades ago, they decided that marijuana was marijuana. It's all the same. Everybody, I guess, knew it when they saw it. So this newest iteration of what they do and don't have to do, they've thrown a wrench in the gears, because part of this was not necessarily intentional on their part. But by defining hemp as anything, legal hemp as anything that's less than the 0.3% THC, they actually, in theory, left room for what... Now imagine that we don't have a chemist in a trial telling us what the substance is, although in my possession of marijuana trials, they've always brought a chemist. But now they also have to prove the percentage of THC. Now, there's no realistic chance that any of my clients had, if it's what we call marijuana, it wouldn't be 0.3 THC or less than that. It would be much higher than that. But currently, the state of Texas has no way of prosecuting those cases because they don't have the equipment to test for the quantification. So there are a lot of different things going on all over Texas. I have already had some favorable results since June 10th of this year, which is when that part of the law would have started. And I am unsure of whether or not some of those clients that may have already gotten dismissals might get prosecuted again when that equipment becomes available. That's just a big unknown, okay? And so, talked about this a little bit last month, I think, as well. But one huge thing to take away from this, since I forgot to mention that marijuana itself is illegal in the first part of the spiel, is this. When you see those headlines that imply that you're just going to somehow have some sort of a hemp defense, yeah, you might or you might not, but you should still be careful out there. and don't flaunt anything because there's no point in doing that. We really don't know where it's going to end up in terms of how that affects the criminal cases. Now, in terms of more specifics about the civil portions of the hemp bill that don't apply to my clients, I'm really not an expert on that portion of it. All right. Does anybody have any, I'll take any question, but any mostly criminal side question? Yes?
What is the statute of limitations on bringing a charge for possession of marijuana?
Fantastic question. What is the statute of limitations on bringing a charge of possession of marijuana, possession of THC? So, I want to start with the really important part. What the statute of limitations is not, because 90% of the people that call me up and start by telling me that they're not that worried about this case because the state is going to have a statute of limitations problem run into the brick wall that I'm about to tell you. What the statute of limitations is not is it doesn't mean that there's only X amount of time they have to prosecute you from the time that the offense was supposedly committed. It's how long they have to charge you. They don't have to finish it. So, what happens with a lot of people, and I'll move on to the answers in just a minute, is, they get arrested for something, they have a court date. Typically, this can happen in bond forfeiture situations where maybe their attorney didn't notify them of their court date or whatever, but they miss a court date. Several years goes by. Well, they were already charged with that offense at the county clerk's office months or years ago. So none of that has anything to do with the statute of limitations. But the situation I was describing about a client being re-prosecuted, it absolutely would apply to, which is why Jax's question is so good. The short version is that the statute of limitations is 2 years on a misdemeanor, and it would be 3 years on any of the types of felonies that I would expect the clients we're talking about to be facing. There are longer statutes of limitations, but I can't envision a situation that any of what we're talking about here tonight that's applicable to. So it's 2 or 3 years. So here's how it would work. And I'm going to use a felony example because I just think this is more likely in a felony, and so today is October 2nd. Let's say that my client gets arrested tonight, October 2nd, 2019, for possession of marijuana, THC other than marijuana, meaning felony, vaping oil or dabs or something like that. And let's say that we go to court, hires me, and we go to court on November 2nd and December 2nd, and on December 2nd, just 2 months after the arrest, they kind of decide, okay, we don't know what we're doing with these hemp cases right now, we're going to dismiss it. They would still have until October 2nd of 2022 to rebring those charges in the first place. So that's a long time, and if they want to get the technology during that time period, they're going to. In fact, I know that some of them want to do it, and some of them will be doing it, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be going back and re-prosecuting. Realistically, I think any police department working along with a district attorney's office that wanted to could easily get those cases done in the time that would be allotted to them. Probably less than a year. So it's a good question. I hope that answered it. Any other questions?
So when the testing issue with hemp came out, Greg Abbott said you can't get up for marijuana, you can't test for THC, you can find them or prosecute them as a illegal hemp transport. Can a DA try you as a marijuana case, and because you don't have the testing, fail, and then say, no, this isn't marijuana, this is hemp, and then switch the charge?
Fantastic question. And I'm going to repeat it the best that I can. So when this whole hemp kerfuffle came up, there was talk by Greg Abbott. There was also talk on what's called the Texas County and District Attorneys Association, which if you caught that means it's a bunch of prosecutors, that's what it is, saying, hey, nobody has hemp licenses. Remember, I was asked a question about licenses. I don't know much about them, but I know you're supposed to have them if you have hemp. So prosecutors were trying to come up with an either-or situation, a gotcha type situation. And I believe there is, and I think it's a misdemeanor offense of possessing hemp. A civil penalty of $500 for being caught with actual hemp but without having a license for it. I have a couple of thoughts on this. The first one that's important for most people is this. Again, what my clients have and what you're likely to have is not hemp. So, I mean, ultimately, no, you're not going to be guilty of possessing hemp without a license. So it's sort of a chicken or the egg situation. Unknown how that's going to be handled, but I really find it difficult to believe that the state's going to try to proceed on something like that. It depends on the county, though. I'm sure there may be some political prosecutor somewhere that thinks that they can get their name in the paper for being the first one to get a possession of hemp without a certificate problem. So we'll just have to see if that happens. I can imagine some defenses to that, but they would be case-by-case specific. And, yeah, does that either avoid or answer your question? Okay. Anybody else?
What is the difference between dismissing charges and refusing or not accepting charges?
What is the answer between dismissing charges or refusing and not accepting them? Another great question. It goes back to that whole JP5 thing that I was talking about, where I was saying they're not going to fingerprint you and start that process. So it's a semantics question, which is fair. But, I mean, words have different meanings. And they have legal meanings, and then they have outside of the legal context meanings. And those aren't always, of course, the same. They can overlap. But I think the fairest way to think about that would be this. Due process requires that the state formally inform you and your lawyer of what you're charged with. Now, when you're driving down the road after going to the bar, and he pulls you out of the car, and he gives you field sobriety tests, and you fail, and you blow, or the blood comes back a .14, and you go to jail for DWI, we all know that you're going to be charged with DWI. But what I'm talking about is it's not a matter of us not knowing, but they literally have to write down on a piece of paper and say, on October 2nd, 2019, Jaime Spencer did then and there operate a motor vehicle while intoxicated in a public place. That's just so that you literally have a formal notice of exactly the elements of the offense that they intend to prove. So in a felony, that's called an indictment. That's a scary word to most of my clients, but it's really just a piece of paper that says what felony they're charging you with. So I would say that refusing to press charges or declining a case would be a situation where they decided either to not file in a misdemeanor, it's called a complaint and information, or to not go to the grand jury and not even present the case to get that indictment, that felony piece of paper. Now, once you've reached that stage, and then somebody else comes in and convinces the next group of prosecutors, those are the trial court prosecutors, hey, Jamie's case should be dismissed, they're dismissing that formal charging instrument, if that makes sense. So there's literally a piece of paper that charges me with it, not just a cop telling the sheriff as he's turning me over, hey, this guy's drunk. All right, are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to pass the witness. Thank you so much for coming tonight, guys. Appreciate it. Give you back to Carlos.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Jamie. So before we go ahead with our next speaker, just two big things. First, we have a giveaway from 420 Science and Grav Labs. So if you haven't signed up for that and you're interested in doing so, please, right over at our table. And second, we've got Bill Norton. Bill Norton is in the house. Bill Norton, if for those of us that don't know, Bill Norton is the founder of Texas NORML, if I'm not mistaken, back in 1973. He got all this going, and we're still keeping it going strong today. So Bill, thank you. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and keep going with our next speaker. Our next speaker is a retired detective from the Pflugerville Police Department. He is currently our law enforcement advisor with Texas NORML. Phil Giroux is going to go ahead and speak to us about interacting with law enforcement and first responders regarding cannabis. So Phil, please go ahead and come to the stage, man.
Hey everybody, we're out here on this nice cool October night. How's that? We're out here on this nice cool October night. I think every month I keep saying, next month it'll be cool, next month it'll be nice. It's not bad though, it was bad earlier. So, to tell my story, my name's Phil. I'm actually not retired. I quit my job. January of this year was actually the day after Martin Luther King Day. I've been with the Pflugerville Police Department at that point just over 11 years, over 13 years in law enforcement. I also worked for the Sheriff's Department as a corrections officer. But I got up that day and I didn't feel good, and I went to work anyway. Had a pretty bad morning at work, so I decided to go home. And when I got home, I sat in my car for about 30 minutes, thinking about taking my own life. That's the last day I went to work. So I decided to take a medical leave of absence and had some time to reflect. So I stayed home, kind of did stuff at the house, and then my wife and I decided I wasn't going back to work. And I think that was the most liberating feeling. It was like a giant weight came off of me when I decided to quit my job. After 13 years, I actually had left as a sergeant. I had been a sergeant for over 6 years. At that point, I was supervising detectives investigating persons crimes. So you can imagine anything involving people, a lot of child abuse, a lot of sex cases, ugly stuff that is not fun to deal with. That took a toll on me. Just a lot of things in the job took a toll on me. There's a lot of things, and I know that service members of the military also deal with these things in very large numbers. That took a toll on me, seeing all the worst of people, seeing all the worst things, and I kind of lied to myself. I was to the point where I couldn't sleep at night. The only way that I could sleep was to drink about a quart of vodka every night and then wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with nightmares and a hangover. And I did that for several years until that day that I finally decided to pull the plug. And I knew that it wasn't worth my life and not being there for my family that I decided that I made that decision. So I started my own business. I do home remodeling, getting into demolition stuff. It's been super busy. It's been awesome. And I don't miss the job one bit. So I actually resigned. I left. I hadn't been back to work since January, but I resigned on April 1st. So April Fool's Day, I went in and told them I wasn't coming back. April 4th was the first time that I had cannabis again in about 20 years. And it was a very different experience using it from a medical standpoint. As far as sleeping, I finally could sleep. I don't wake up in the night with nightmares. And that, since then, I've been a daily cannabis user. Every single evening, I use cannabis. And I tell everybody that I know about it, because there's no reason to be embarrassed or ashamed. And what I found out after I wasn't a cop anymore is that, like, almost everybody is using cannabis, including grandmas and grandpas and brothers and sisters and all kinds of responsible adults. And so I always knew about NORML. Even when I was a police officer, I knew what it was. And actually, I've always supported marijuana legalization. I never thought it was that it needed to be illegal. That being said, as a police officer, I've probably arrested hundreds of people for marijuana. So I knew about NORML, and I didn't want to be a hypocrite and keep this to myself and have that on my conscience. I feel obligated to tell people my story and to tell people how cannabis benefits me. I think if we continue to tell these stories, continue to share them, it will break the stigma with certain people, and you can change their mind. If they're like, oh yeah, I know that guy, he's my neighbor, he owns his own business, he goes to work every day, he takes care of his family, loves his kids. Oh, and he's a cannabis user? Oh, that's okay. No big deal. And so I think we can change that by just talking about it. We also have the benefit that cannabis is becoming legal in more and more places, even for recreational purposes. Yet we're stuck here in Texas without an accessible or reasonable medical program. Nobody can get it. So I came to my first NORML meeting, I think it was the April meeting. And when I came in, the first person I talked to was David Bass. And David Bass is the director of Veterans Outreach, and he also heads up Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana. So I talked to Dave and told him my story, and he welcomed me in with open arms. He said, come in, let me introduce you. He took me around. I met all the board members. I met all the regulars, a lot of the people that are here today, and everyone's been super cool, super welcoming, and I've really appreciated it. So I knew I wanted to become involved in the movement because I knew my experience had value, and it's the law enforcement perspective is hard to get, and especially when you're talking about cannabis. Even the majority of the officers that I personally know, and I know a lot, support legalization. A lot of times they don't feel comfortable to say anything because of the executive leadership in law enforcement. And they don't feel safe saying, yeah, I don't think marijuana should be illegal. I don't think it's a problem. But I know there are a lot of police officers that really don't care, and there are a lot of police officers that would probably use it. If I knew the benefit that I would have gotten from cannabis, I'd have been smoking when I was a cop. And I'd probably still be a cop. And that's just the truth. I really do think for issues of PTSD, chronic stress, anxiety, all the things that veterans suffer and that other public servants suffer, firefighters, EMTs, police officers, PTSD it's rampant, and the police won't talk about it because they're embarrassed. But I'm telling you, a lot of police officers are walking around every single day with PTSD, barely keeping their lives together. And we need better than that. So through speaking with the NORML board, I decided to come on as a law enforcement advisor, hoping to provide that perspective that would help, especially during the next legislative session. I know that we had an issue with getting people, getting the viewpoint from officers that may support legalization or just not demonize cannabis. And to counter that, they had on-duty officers at the legislature in uniform up there testifying how bad marijuana is. And our side now didn't have any response. Well, I'm here to say I will be at the next legislative session and I will testify. And I'll be glad to do it. Again, I feel obligated to do this, to become part of this movement, and I know that we're on the right side of history. And there's no doubt. And it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. In Texas, they're going to fight it. Dan Patrick is going to continue to obstruct the law. And unfortunately, we have him again for the next legislature. So we'll see how it goes. But hopefully we can unelect some people that are against cannabis and elect some people that have some common sense. We can quit wasting our time, resources, and everything on a plant that's good for people. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was kind of maybe some tips or suggestions for if you do get pulled over and maybe you have cannabis. The first thing is, don't smoke in your car. If you smoke in your car, a police officer is going to smell it. You may not smell it because you smoke every day and you always smell it and your car probably always smells like it anyway, but I promise you, a police officer, if you've been smoking recently in the car, they will smell it. And you will probably get your car searched and probably end up in handcuffs. So don't smoke in your car. Number two, if you can keep it in some kind of bag that prevents the smell from getting out. They make some cool like carbon-lined bags that may help. But the smell is usually what's going to get your car searched. And despite what's being reported in the news, people are still being arrested for cannabis. In Williamson County they are. We had a visitor here last month that was dealing with some cannabis cases related to a canine search when he was stopped in Williamson County. I've got another issue with canines because if somebody could please explain to me how a dog knows the difference between hemp and marijuana. They're both cannabis. The dog is going to indicate, and hemp is a legal product in this entire country. So their dogs are worthless. And I'm a former canine handler. I handled a narcotic detector dog. So there should be some interesting challenges, I would think, legally when it comes to canine sniffs. I forgot where I was. When you're stopped, don't be a dick. Even if the cop's a dick. Because guess what? They most likely have cameras in their car. And if you do get arrested and go to court, how's it going to look when the officer is a dick and you're nice? It helps, trust me. Juries are humans. They like nice people. The next one. Don't admit to anything. Remember that? You have the right to remain silent. Police officers won't always tell you that. They may wait, and then it's kind of murky on whether or not it's a custodial interview. And they'll get you to spill your guts, especially if the officer's really nice, because they're going to be, I'm officer friendly. I'm here to help you. You just tell me the truth and I'll help you. So you admit that it's marijuana, and guess what? Now you have a problem. So the biggest advice is shut the fuck up. Don't admit to anything, and don't be rude, but just shut up. That's how a lot of people get convicted, is they admit what they're doing. So just be nice, be cooperative, don't fight with them, don't argue, and you'll be fine. That's what attorneys are for. Right, Jamie? If you do get arrested, hopefully you can get a good attorney, because they can help you a lot, but you have to be quiet. And don't drive high, like seriously, because you will get arrested for DWI, and they will draw your blood, because they just have to get a search warrant, and it's really easy. It takes like 5 minutes to fill out a form, and they'll have a search warrant for your blood. So that's really it. Don't forget to sign up for the giveaway before we're done if you haven't. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Okay, hi, it's me. I'm Jax. I'm the executive director of Texas NORML. And I am wondering, who is here for the first time? Raise your hand. Hi, welcome. Ooh, look at this corner. Sassy new people over here. Okay, raise your hand if you are a Texas NORML member. Awesome. Thanks, guys. You guys make our mission possible. Raise your hand if you're a board member and you serve on the board. Awesome. These people create all of the events and actions that we do through our network. So it takes all of us to get this stuff done, and we have to diversify and make sure that we have people with all kinds of outlooks and perspectives. And I wanted to add something to what Phil said. Recently, APD put out a memo that said that smell alone can no longer be probable cause. So it has to be in conjunction with some other type of evidence, or, you know, then their nose tingled and so therefore it was bad. So that is a good thing. I wanted to go over a couple things that happened since we talked last and some things that are coming up. Last time I saw you, I was headed to DC to go lobby with NORML up at the Capitol at the Hill, and it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. It was also a lot of work. You guys, I walked 46 miles in 4 days. You're welcome. Calves of steel. See, I'm not kidding. It was a lot. But what we did is we had a leadership conference, which I presented at, and helped people kind of learn some standards for operating organizations on a whole bunch of different topics. And then the next day we had a conference, which I was able to MC at. We had some really great legislators and opinion leaders that participated. And then we had our day lobbying at the Capitol, and actually Steve was there with us. He is a veteran and participated. And we had a group of 7. When I started going up to DC, there had been no one, and then there was me, and then it was just me, and I was all by myself for like 2 years. And then this year, we had 7 people from Texas that came and participated, and we went on about a dozen different meetings with different legislators. And in between then and now, there actually has been a vote, and it was a very important vote, and I want to give you a few details about it. So the members of the House of Representatives voted 321 to 103 in favor of the Safe Banking Act. Why is this important, you might ask? Because marijuana people need to put their money somewhere, like a bank. And this would amend federal law so that banks and financial institutions could actually conduct business with cannabis businesses. So it's very important because it also was a supermajority of the House that voted to recognize that marijuana is legal and it's being regulated, and we need to find a way to deal with it financially. So it's actually a really important move forward. If you go to texasnormal.org, you'll also find the voting record for how the Texas congressional people voted on it. But just to let you know, we have 36 Congress peoples, men and women, and there were 18 yeas, 17 nays, and 1 present not voting. Of the yeas, 13 were Democrats, and 5 were Republicans. Ain't nobody tell me nothing. This is bipartisan. We don't deal with some partisan boo. But I would like to note that it was legislation about money and not the MORE Act, which would have dealt with expunction, reducing penalties, rescheduling. So we still have a lot of work to do. So let's not forget that there is still work at the federal level, bills that can be moved on that as well. I just came from the Williamson County Western Democrat meeting, and they invited me to speak about marijuana policy, and representative for the district was there, and a councilman from the district was there, and it was Councilman Jimmy Flanagan, and he actually sat on the recent city council hearing to decide if they would spend money for more testing to be able to test for the percentages of THC. APD was asking them for money for that. They haven't come up with a final resolution yet, but it should happen sometime in October. And I'm very loosely paraphrasing. The chairman basically said something like, that seems like a silly expenditure. So I'm going to go with maybe it won't happen, but you never know. All right, so let's talk about upcoming things that are about to happen. So we talked about hemp. It's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. There will be a hearing with the Department of State Health Services regarding human consumables for hemp products. It's a very narrowly targeted hearing just about human consumables, and it's got 3 talking points essentially, or I'm sorry, 3 bullet points that they're going to be addressing. If you go to texasnormal.org, we do have an email address there, so if you wanted to email some thoughtful comments on things you would like to see or learn about in regulation, that would be very beneficial. I will be there to offer official statement as well, talking mainly about the extremely important need that there be testing that tells us what kind of mycotoxins, pesticides, solvents, adulterants, and heavy metals might be present. These are things that have health implications for people, so if people are consuming them, there needs to be truth in labeling and accountability for those who lie. Because if you are following the news, you will find out that there have been testing of legal CBD vape cartridges in Houston. I do not know the provider of who it was. I just want to preface this by saying there are people doing good business with good product, but know where it's coming from and get a certificate of authenticity. To continue what my horror story I'm about to tell you, they tested 10 vape cartridges at the Houston Forensic Science Center, and all 10 of them came back with adulterants, ranging from spice, and I think it was like oxytocin, oxycontin. Oxytocin's like a natural chemical. That one's fine. I'm talking about the bad one. So there is a need that there be some sort of standards that let people know what's happening. If you're looking at the black market, which is different than the CBD market, we are seeing some cartridges coming up with pesticides in them. It's important to know that, you know, microbutanol, whenever it hits 401 degrees, it turns into cyanide, you guys. Like, you could die. That's a poison that they kill a lot of people with before. So it's not good. So not to be a fearmonger, because there's good product out there, but these are the reasons that it's important that we have consumer protections in place, third-party testing to verify that these are accurate testings and levels that are being given us. So that will be tomorrow. On the 15th of this month, there is an organization called the Future Forum, and they're putting an event together at the LBG Presidential Library, and it's going to be a panel on legalizing marijuana. What are the economic, cultural, and social impacts, featuring me? I'll be there. But also, did you guys know that Leafly moved to Austin? Yeah! One of them's, their name is Yoko, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Miyashita. Yes, that's it. I'm just going to stick with it. And then, actually, the Travis County District Attorney will be there as well. And her name is Margaret Moore. So we'll all be talking about that. I saw Margaret Moore actually at the Texas Trib Fest that happened over this last weekend. She was a part of a panel of DAs that are being very forward-thinking on how they deal with possession of marijuana. So that was a very interesting conversation. I do believe that it is a free event. So if you guys want to sign up, it'll be on October 15th. And then on the 19th, I live in a district that was represented by a staunch prohibitionist for too long. And in the last election, he lost to a Democrat who ended up authoring some thoughtful legislation about not testing state employees for marijuana unless they're law enforcement, and then test them. And he's putting together a town hall out in Williamson County, and I will be presenting to the town hall, or I'm sorry, it's at the Cypress Creek ACC campus, and I'll be presenting again about marijuana. What I usually like to do with these types of things is give a 15-minute rundown of what the current laws are and do Q&A. That's what I did tonight at the Democratic meeting, and I am always surprised by some of the questions that I get, and it usually leads for really interesting conversation. So I'm looking forward to that. And then all you folks who raised your hands as members, FYI, our members only party is coming up. If you are not a member, you can become a member and you can come to this event. We do it once a year. It's going to be on Saturday, October 26th from 7 to 10 p.m. It is at a new location that we have not done an event at before, but I can't tell you where it is because it's a secret. You only get to know if you buy a ticket. And we don't sell tickets at the door, but just so you know, it's a catered event. We're going to have live music at it as well, and we do a costume contest. Costumes are not obligatory. Some people are not interested. That's fine. But if you want to dress up and win a bong, then you should do that, because we'll have a costume contest with some prizes for you. First 50 people to buy tickets will also get a goodie bag at the door. So there's that. Spooky Sativa Soiree. So marijuana and fancy is basically what that means. If anybody has heard of the organization called MAPS, they work on all kinds of naturopathic medicines from different plants. Plant-based medicine, I guess, is mostly what they might call it. And they will be putting on a psychedelic summit here in Austin from on November 2nd and the 3rd. And they'll be doing a panel on drug policy. And so I'll be talking about the cannabis perspective of it on that. And that will be here in Austin on the 2nd and 3rd of November. I also wanted to make sure to mention that the veterans will be participating in the new Braunfels Veterans Day Parade on November the 1st. So if you would like to participate and march with them, we have information on our Facebook page and on our website, so make sure that you check that out. We also have an application in through a different vets organization, I believe it's called Veterans for Natural Rights, to march in the Austin Veterans Parade, and hopefully we are able to participate in both, because then it'll be a really fun weekend of... I'm sorry, I said November 1st. Veterans Day Parade is November 9th. Thank you for that correction. I literally wrote that down, printed it out, and brought it here and told y'all the wrong dang date. All right, November 9th. And then that means that if everything goes well, on November 11th, that following Monday, there will be a Veterans Day Parade here in Austin as well. Okay, so I believe everybody knows that we're doing a raffle giveaway, right? Who wants to win a thing? First of all, as Miss Betty walks over here, shaking that, let me show you what Grav and 420 Science have given us. Do you see how cute? Like, it's a little bubbler with a thing here. It's real cute. Can you see it? And then a little stash jar to go with it from 420 Science. So this is a package deal tonight, one giveaway only. Brrr, who will be the winner? Is this one piece of paper? It is, okay. Jesse, you're a winner, boo. Come get it. All right, everybody, that's all I got for y'all tonight. Thank you for coming out. We will see you next month here at Flamingo Cantina. Tip your bartenders, and everybody have an amazing night. Thank you.